Since the beginning of the Cold War, numerous American planes have embarked on espionage missions over territory under Soviet control, and on many occasions, they have been successful. However, during the bloodiest period of this undeclared war, there have been several lethal confrontations. Between 1950 and 1970, enemy bloodshed was more common than people believe, and every American aircraft that penetrated Soviet airspace ran the enormous risk of never returning home. For that reason, in this new video from Military Aviation, we will learn about 10 cases in which the United States Air Force was discovered and had to face death at the hands of Soviet power. Our first stop takes us to April 8, 1950, when a PB-4Y2 privateer of the United States Navy was flying over the Baltic Sea, 16 kilometers south of the Latvian city of Liepāja, which at that time belonged to the Soviet Union. The long-range bomber designed for the U.S. Navy was detected by the enemy and had to face for Lavochkin Li-11 fighters, a new combat aircraft that had been developed as a long-range model to act as an escort for the Tupolev Tu-4 bombers. The fire from the 23mm Nudelman N-23 cannons spelled the end for the PB-4Y2 privateer, which was completely destroyed, with its crew of 10 men killed. That was the first case on a list that would only grow over the years. So, continuing our journey, we move to November 6, 1951. On that day, an American P-2V Neptune, also belonging to the Navy, was flying over the Sea of Japan. This Lockheed-designed aircraft was the main tool of the United States for anti-submarine patrols during the early years of the Cold War. However, it was no match for Soviet MiG-15 fighters. This was one of the first jet fighters with swept wings and gained great fame in the skies over Korea, where it outperformed all enemy straight-winged combat aircraft. Once again, its power was demonstrated when it shot down the American P-2V Neptune 30 kilometers from Vladivostok, resulting in the deaths of all 10 members of its crew. While the U.S. Navy initially claimed that its aircraft had been attacked during a reconnaissance flight, after the end of the Cold War, they admitted it was an intelligence mission. Let's advance to October 7, 1952, where once again the Li-11 would play a leading role. The machine gun fire from this Soviet fighter brought down an RB-29 bomber of the U.S. Air Force over the Kuril Islands. The 8-man crew was declared dead after the attack, and in 1994, the remains of one of the crew members, Captain John R. Dunham, were located and returned to the United States after old Soviet documents confirmed that he had been found and buried on the nearby Uri Island. July 1953. The next case takes us once again near Vladivostok. The strategic bomber RB-50 Superfortress manufactured by Boeing would fall victim to the cannon fire of 2 MiG-17s. This was one of the most modern fighters of the time, developed from the MiG-15, and although most of these combat aircraft could not carry air-to-air missiles, they achieved numerous shootdowns thanks to their powerful Nudelman N-23 and N-37 cannons. This attack claimed the lives of 17 crew members of the American aircraft, while only one survived and was rescued from the sea by an Allied destroyer. We arrive in September 1958, when the Soviet Union needed 4 MiG-17s to intercept and destroy a C-130 Hercules, one of the most recognized American aircraft. This giant dedicated to tactical transport was violating Soviet airspace on the current Turkish-Armenian border while conducting a risky reconnaissance mission. After the attack by the deadly enemy fighters, all 17 occupants of the American aircraft perished. Let's fast forward to May 1960, and we find the famous CIA aircraft, the Lockheed U-2. This was a high-altitude surveillance aircraft nicknamed the Dragon Lady. However, the peculiarity of this case has to do with who was piloting it. The person in command was Francis Gary Powers, whose plane was hit by one of the 14 S-75 Vina missiles launched against it. That surface-to-air missile became the most widely deployed air defense missile in history and, on that day, brought down the American aircraft near Sverdlovsk. Gary Powers survived the attack but was captured by the Soviets, who sentenced him to 10 years in prison. However, in 1962, he was released in exchange for Rudolf Abel as part of a spy swap, a prisoner exchange known as the Berlin Spy Exchange. A few months after that episode, in July 1960, an American RB-47H Stratojet bomber was shot down over the Barents Sea, 209 kilometers north of the Kola Peninsula by a MiG-19, the world's second supersonic fighter. Captain Bill Palm was the only confirmed casualty, while 3 other crew members were never found. Simultaneously, 2 crew members managed to survive. October 1962. Another Lockheed U-2 would play a role in a particular case. The aircraft belonged to the 4080th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing and was shot down by an SA-2 Guideline surface-to-air missile from a Soviet battery. The distinctive aspect of this case was that it did not occur in Europe or Asia, where the Soviet Union had its greatest power, but rather on American soil. The missile managed to bring down the American aircraft over Cuba. Another detail of this episode was that the pilot posthumously received the Air Force Cross from the United States Air Force. As we approach the end, we arrive at January 24, 1964. On that day, the next American shootdown occurred, and once again, the MiG-19 armed with its 30mm cannon and negative 160 Argentine pesos and 212 missiles played the leading role. The victim was a U.S. Air Force T-39 Sabreliner based in Wiesbaden. The incident occurred when the aircraft was flying over Thuringia, in the territory of East Germany. After the attack, all 3 crew members were declared dead. To conclude, the last case takes us to March 10, 1964, when an RB-66 destroyer entered the airspace of East Germany. This aerial reconnaissance version of the Douglas-design light bomber was detected by the powerful MiG-21, one of the most successful fighters in history. This supersonic interceptor has served in the air forces of about 50 countries and remains in service over 60 years after its introduction. On that day, the Soviet fighter used its 30mm cannon and a variety of missiles to shoot down the American bomber. However, its crew managed to survive and was repatriated to America. U.S. authorities attributed the invasion of rival airspace to a suspicious compass failure on the aircraft. As an extra note, it's worth mentioning that on October 21, 1970, a Ru-8 Seminole that had taken off from Turkey disappeared over Armenian airspace, which was then a republic of the Soviet Union. This incident is classified as another shootdown by Soviet forces, as indicated by reports from the United States-Russia Joint Commission on Prisoners of War and Missing in Action. However, no further information is provided. In this way, we have reviewed one of the bloodiest periods of the Cold War in the skies, where both sides were able to demonstrate that their developments were not just part of an arms race facade, but their power was very real. Now, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. Stay tuned to our channel for our next video.